The City of Fort Lauderdale is hosting the Board of Adjustment meetings in both a virtual and in-person format. Any member of the public that is interested in speaking before the Board of Adjustment virtually is required to complete the virtual speaker card. Any member of the public that is interested in speaking before the Board of Adjustment in person may sign up to speak at the meeting or by using the virtual speaker card. Due to COVID-19 distance requirements, there is very limited seating available. Therefore, we are encouraging members of the public to participate virtually when possible. The public will be able to listen to and view Board of Adjustment meetings at www.fortlauderdale.gov/FLTV, www.youtube.com, City of Fort Lauderdale, as well as Comcast channels 78 and AT&T UVerse channel 99. To participate in the meeting virtually, registration is required. To register, click on the Register Now button and complete the Zoom webinar registration form on the city's website located on the Board of Adjustment page. Individuals who wish to speak will be heard prior to the close of public comment period. If you have trouble signing up, send an email to chcrawford@fortlauderdale.gov. Any caller that is unidentified will not be provided access to the meeting. So please provide your name and address to the site monitor when asked. Note, if you would like to share a document, please upload the document when submitting a request to speak. Participants, please remember to mute your phones and/or computers if you are not speaking, and silence your devices so that we do not hear interference. Thank you very much for helping us to get through meetings in the continuation of this trying time. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Jamie, can you run the roll, see if we've got a quorum?
Yes. Mr. Elfman?
Here.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. McTeague?
Here.
Mr. Reynolds?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
And Cheryl Nelson. So you have
Here.
a quorum plus one.
Very
So-
good.
So will Mr. Lambrecht's only vote if someone needs to abstain?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mike, stick around, but you're not voting as of yet. Mr. Maxey, you're on.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maxey. In your packets, board members, you have the minutes of our last meeting. Are there any changes, corrections, additions, deletions?
Move to
Hearing
accept.
none, is there a motion to approve?
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Jamie, did you get the motion and second?
Was Ellis McTeague correct?
I think that is correct.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so announcements. Each member of the public that wishes to speak after each item is presented and discussed by the board will have 3 minutes per item. Representatives of associations and groups will have 5 minutes. Jamie, would you like to swear in all speakers before we start?
Yes. Anyone who intends to speak, please stand and raise your right hand.
Additionally, those that are online, if you would turn on your cameras for us, please.
There's only one online, yeah. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give during this public hearing will be truthful and accurate? Thank you. And Mr. Chair, could we have a staff person identify staff that's in chambers, because I can see online?
Absolutely. Shaquila, can you do that? Malik? Mr. Malik, can you do that?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
We have over here to my left is Shaquila Crawford, assistant. Dwayne Spence. Mr. Spence is our city attorney from city attorney's office. He's representing the board,
Assistant City Attorney.
Assistant City Attorney. Sorry. And
Oh, come on, you got a promotion there for a few minutes to win.
This is the second board that was done to me, so.
Bert Ford is here, zoning chief, and our director is here today, Mr. Anthony Fajardo, and Stephanie is from my DSD office is here. And am I missing anybody?
You're missing yourself, Mr. Muhammad
Yes.
Malik.
I'm the zoning administrator, Muhammad Malik. Thank you. So we are all done.
Perfect. All right, so we've done the identification, we've done the swear in, we've got a roll, we are going. Let me call the first case, which is case number PLN BOA 2108-0001. Owner is M&B Home Property Investments, Inc. The agent is Lena Martinez. Is Miss Martinez here?
No, sir. Lena Martinez's flight was delayed. So she just texted me that she just landed.
So, Mr.
And-
Dora, are you doing the presentation for this matter?
Yes, sir. I can do the
Okay,
presentation.
let me hold for you for 1 second. And Jamie, can you go down the roll and see if there are any disclosures?
Yes. Mr. Elfman,
Bye.
Ms. Ellis,
Site visit.
Mr. Maxey,
None.
Mr. McGinley. I don't know if his mic is not on. We can't hear you.
No.
Okay. Mr. McTeague,
Mr. McTeague,
None.
Mr. Reynolds,
None.
and Chair Nelson.
none.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Dore, it is, I know, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
You go.
The floor is yours.
Okay, we submitted permits for 601 Northeast 16th Avenue, which was approved. We did the construction, we started the construction, we got to the second floor when we submitted the adjacent building, which is 603 Northeast 16. Once we submitted the second building for approval, the city zoning, Bert, if I'm not mistaken, told me that the first building was approved by mistake because the garage is supposed to be at 50% from the width of the house. When it was approved the way it is. And we requested for the building to stay the same way he designed because it's very hard to change the design of the building, especially after those townhouses being under contract and sold the way they are. And changing the garage into, I believe he said 13 feet, will not let us be as a two-car garage and create a bigger problem. I think everything that was supposed to be explained in the paperwork was submitted. I wasn't 100% ready for this meeting. I thought Lena's gonna be here, but her plane was delayed. So that's why I had to go online.
Well, I'm going to ask you if you think Lena has a better handle on the reasons for the variance. Would you like to defer to the next meeting so she can be here?
No, sir. I mean, I know exactly what it is. I'm the one that building them and I'm the one that owning them. So maybe she can, I don't know, express herself a little bit better, but that's the main reason.
You're doing pretty well.
Thank you.
Anything else in your presentation? Otherwise, I'll open it up for board questions and then we'll see if there are any members of the public.
No, I think it's very simple case that, you know, we started in a certain way and then we was asked if we can get back, which is gonna create just bigger issues. All the surrounding around the property, I think the city requested us to take some photos. Most of the buildings are two-car garages. Most of the buildings are in the same look of us. So we're not like something different. We blend in the neighborhood. And I didn't know it exists. And I built pretty long time in Fort Lauderdale in Dania Beach, and we're building single family homes and townhouses. And it's the first time that I discovered I need to be at 50% of my land.
50% or less. Any questions from the board?
For me?
Is
No,
it-
yeah, well, for you or for staff.
Yes.
Any questions of the board or from the board? Doug,
I have one.
let me get Doug's out and then I'll hop back to you.
I'm trying to, first of all, I just want to make sure the record's clear. The owner has clearly authorized you to represent her in this matter and present today?
Yes,
I
sir.
believe he is the owner.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did we get here? How did you miss this? And how did the city miss this?
I didn't even know this zoning code is even existing. And once we submitted for the second building, that's when they stopped the first building. But the first building was already being built, block was done, typings was done, and that's when they came up with it. But it was approved as a 2-car garage units.
Who did the plans?
Architect named Daniel Rivers.
And he didn't understand this issue either?
I guess not, because he did for me a couple of plans and the same thing.
Okay,
No further
and before we hop back to the board, I want to pull this back to staff. Bert, I know this is a variance for 603. What's the city doing about 601?
.601 will comply with the code. It was failed during the review process, and that's how we found out about the adjoining unit of the duplex.
So how is, if this one doesn't meet the code, how is the one that's already built but not meeting the 50% rule going to comply? Do we know?
No, I think there's a confusion. The one that's 603,
Right.
that's the one that's not meeting the code. 601,
So you've got a duplex, you've got two buildings that are roughly
yes,
identical
sir.
to
Yes,
each other. Why is it one can meet the code and one can't?
Because one, we already was in construction once everything get caught, and it got caught because of the second building we submitted for permitting.
Right, but you haven't started this building yet,
Which one?
right?
The six-
You haven't
the
started
603?
603 yet. You haven't
No,
started
603 done, they already have a roof.
Okay, then I'm not understanding this. Got it. Because your presentation was you built 601 and then you went in for permitting for 603 and it didn't meet it.
No, it's the other way around.
Okay, so you've got a building that was approved by the city, incorrectly or not, with a frontage that has a garage that is more than 50% of the building frontage. And you're
Yes.
trying not to have to disassemble or retrofit your building.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
And on the other building, which Bert mentioned, is going to be in compliances because the city didn't approve the plans. I had to cut the garages off, which was no problem because the building wasn't built yet. So we comply with the second building to be at 50%.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I know I had cut somebody off on the board hopping my question in. Are there any other questions from board members?
Blaze McGinley.
Mr. McGinley?
You answered the first question I had, which is, are you plan to develop lot 2, block 1 and lot 1, block 1? And it sounds like that might be 601 and 602, correct?
601 and 603.
Oh, yeah, okay. And because the intent of the code is to avoid these garages, and normally I would definitely come down against this, but I understand that once you're started construction, I mean, the idea of having to completely take the place down and redo it doesn't seem realistic, so. I mean,
Well,
But
it definitely gets it out of the hardship of his own making.
well, but didn't the city help that? I mean, I
Yeah,
think.
I said, it definitely gets him out of the sphere of it being a hardship of his own making.
Exactly. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. I agree. I'm done.
Any other questions or comments from the board? If not, I'm going to open it to the public if indeed there are any members of the public. Hearing none, Do we have anyone signed up from the public to speak on this?
No, we do not, Chair.
In that case, I will close the public hearing. Mr. Dorore, is there anything you want to add before the board starts its deliberations?
No, sir.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to turn it back to the board for Mr. McGinley, a motion.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve case number 1 PLN BOA 21080001 as it meets the criteria.
For the issuance of a variance by the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah, for the,
Second,
A motion, is there a second?
second,
I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion before a vote? Jamie, will you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Elfman,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
yes.
Mr. Maxey,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley,
yes.
Mr. McTeague,
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds,
Yes.
Chair Nelson.
Yes. Mr.
Pass.
Dorore, if I were you, I would not pay Miss Martinez's plane flight at this point.
I need to get another Lisa Martinez.
Okay. Let's move on to our next case, which
Thank you,
is,
guys.
have a good evening. Board of Adjustment case 2108-002, 1302 Northeast 32nd LLC. Agent is, boy, I better get this right. Otherwise, Danica, I'm going to apologize to you all night. Blazanovich. Yes. And is Danica, are you here?
She's here.
Okay. Why don't we, Jamie, go through the roll for disclosures?
Yes. Mr. Elfman,
Multiple site visits and just multiple site visits.
Ms. Ellis,
Site visit,
Mr. Maxey,
None.
Mr. McGinley,
None.
Mr. McTeague,
Site visit.
Mr. Reynolds,
None.
and Chair Nelson.
A Google site visit, actually. All right, Miss, I hope I'm getting this right. Blazanovic, the floor is yours.
The applicant state for the record whether or not you have been sworn.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a yes from her, or
No, actually, she's they're working out the technology. I'm not sure if she heard.
Can you hear me?
we can.
Okay, good evening. My name is Danica. I'm here on behalf of the landlord, applying on behalf of his tenant.
And Danica, I'm sorry, a full name and address for the record.
My name is Danica Blazanovic, and the address is 2831 East Commercial Boulevard, Fort Lauderdale, 33308.
I meant actually your address, unless you're living at Baz Hot Pot.
I'm sorry, Chair, were you sworn in, Danica? Yes, I'm here. Okay.
Okay. So Danica, I was actually asking for your business address.
My
Unless
business,
that is it.
2831 East Commercial Boulevard, Fort Lauderdale.
Okay, all right. The floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm here on behalf of the landlord who is applying on behalf of his tenant. The restaurant, Master Baz Hot Pot. It is a family-oriented all-you-can-eat buffet, and we are requesting a special exception for the required distance separation of 300 feet between establishments selling alcoholic beverages. As you can see, the main obstacle for this restaurant to serve beer and wine is Murphy's Tavern, which is 223 feet from Master Baz Hot Pot. We actually went to Mr. Latour, who is the owner of the bar, and he has no problem with restaurant serving beer and wine. As a matter of fact, he was happy. He was surprised that there was no beer and wine when he went to eat there. So we are showing a few pictures, inviting everyone to come. There is a rowboat serving food, a friendly atmosphere, and the place where you cook your own food, all you can eat. And this is not a place, as you can see, it's not a place that will become a drinking place or after hours. It's strictly a family-oriented dining. So we appreciate your consideration for helping us serve beer and wine.
Any questions? Is that the end of your presentation?
Yes.
Very good. So there's a special exception, it's not a variance request. Any questions from members of the board? My only comment, by the way, Danica, is a nearby neighbor, welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
And hearing none, any members of the public that wish to speak on this? Anyone signed up?
No, no one signed up.
In that case, let me close the public hearing and I will turn it back to the board. Do we have a motion? And again, remember, this is a special exception, not a variance request.
I'll move to approve the special exception request.
Second,
And who did the second?
Howard Elfman.
Mr. Altman, thank you.
Can you state your findings for me, please?
That the
I thought
request,
that would be a motion to approve because it meets the criteria for granting a special exception.
exactly.
Thank you.
We've got a motion and a second. Let's call the roll. And we can send Danica back home for the evening.
Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Maxey,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. McTeague,
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Elfman,
Yes.
and Chair Nelson.
Yes,
Unanimous.
please show unanimous. Very good. Why don't we move on to the
Thank you.
third item on our agenda, which is Board of Adjustment case number 2108003. The owner is Capital Amare Nodlin LLC, represented by Hope Calhoun. Is Ms. Calhoun in the building?
Yes.
Okay, why don't we go down the roll for disclosures?
Mr. Elfman,
Site visit and spoke to council.
Ms. Ellis,
Site visit.
Mr. Maxey,
Spoke with council.
Mr. McGinley,
Site visit, spoke with council.
Mr. McTeague,
Site visit, spoke with council.
Mr. Reynolds,
Done.
and Chair Nelson.
Spoke with council. Ms. Calhoun, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Hope Calhoun. On behalf of the applicant, my office address is 14 Southeast 4th Street, Boca Raton, Florida. Thank you. We're working out the technical things. Move this so you guys can hear me. Thank you. So this is a little unique situation, in my opinion. We have the property address here, 208 Southeast 9th Street. We are seeking a variance request for density in this case. The permitted density is 50 dwelling units per acre, which would equate to approximately 20 units, and we're seeking 41. The important thing, I think, to remember about this request and this property in particular is its location within the RAC. So the density that we're asking for, we're talking about, is regulated by the land use. So again, the land use permits the density we're seeking. The zoning kind of puts a cap on it, and we'll go through that very quickly. This is the location of the property. It's on Southeast 9th Street. On the north side of Southeast 9th Street is RACCC, which has a higher density. And you'll see in my next slide, we talk about the density that's surrounding us. The dividing line between zoning districts is Southeast 9th Street. I am not a planner, and I'm definitely not a planner for the city of Fort Lauderdale, but I think that Southeast 9th is the dividing line because you'll see on the south side of 9th, you have more of a mixture of buildings than you do on the north side of 9th. And on the south side of 9th, where my client's property is, Southeast 9th Street, we are in a different zoning category. And the zoning category that we are in, RACRPO, does regulate density. This project was actually processed maybe about 2018, prior to COVID, 2018, 2019. And at that time, it was approved administratively when it came through. Initially, my client represented himself, and it was approved administratively. Subsequent to that approval, it was realized or recognized that that approval should not have been provided administratively. So that's why we're here. I mentioned that at this point because, again, as I go through my presentation, you can see the proposed density is consistent with the pattern of development in the area. It's consistent with what's permitted within the RAC. So the RAC is not the issue. Excuse me, the land use I meant to say is not the issue. So just by way of example, I just talked about how properties near us have a similar density, or actually a higher density is permitted. So across from us is the Pinnacle at Tarpon River. They are approximately 100 dwelling units per acre, and also the Q Apartments, and they are 75 units per acre. Again, we're seeking a little bit, it says 100, but it's actually a little bit less than 100 units per acre, almost double what is permitted. Whoops. So again, this is just another example of that. And so when we talk about density, and what's important about this project is you really don't notice it as you look at the building envelope, no matter what the density, whether it's the by right density or what we're seeking, the envelope, the exterior of the project looks the same. What's different is the number of units inside. And when this project was originally approved, there were no variances requested. There was no issue with parking, traffic. Nothing is a problem with regard to the density and the amount of units here. Again, I think the issue is the dividing line between the north side of 9th and then the south side of 9th. Just going through very quickly, I won't read them all because you know them and they are in our presented materials. But again, other properties similarly situated, there's nothing special except that we were previously approved here. So it's not, I'm trying to condense all of the approval regulations. We're not self-imposed because, again, previously approved, but for building permit status, I think we would already be up. So again, in keeping with the pattern of development in the area, this is the project that you will see if we are approved. It is consistent with what's around. It is a nice addition. Currently, the property is vacant. Actually, there's a single story building that's sitting on it, but it is unimproved. And so allowing this project will be consistent with what's in the area. And I just want to stress again, from the outside, it looks the same. The density is, again, what's under the roof. So it looks like what is around it. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And my client is here also if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before I get to the rest of the board, I've got a question that is part a question for Mr. Spence and Ms. Calhoun, part a question for you. Mr. Spence, is this the proper subject for a variance application? Because it would seem granting a variance would effectuate a spot rezoning of this property different from the zoning requirements of everybody else that's zoned there. So how do we get around that problem? Or is it not a problem in your mind?
So on its face, it does appear to be a use variance, which is something that many authorities have a differencing of view, and I mean legal authorities with regards to the propriety of those type of variances. But in this particular case, the situation, I'd frame it differently than as council has framed it, as not being a variance from the density, but being a variance from the code provision. I asked Shakayla to provide the board with a copy of ordinance C20-38, just as a way of explanation. If you turn to page 30, you'll see the code previous to this amendment contained a provision that capped the maximum density. That provision you'll see on page 30 was stricken. And then if you look on page 11, you'll see the new provision that where the applicant is requesting a variance from.
And can we get that up on the screen so everybody's looking at the same thing? We have the ability to do that?
I don't know if we have a over. I think Shakayla will do that on Zoom.
Great.
So the current status of the code has removed the maximum density in the area, but the provision that they're seeking the variance from was actually the note to that table that was retained by staff and placed in a new section of the code. And this provision provides that all development within the RAC RPO district that is greater in density than 35 dwelling units per net acre or up to 50 dwelling units per net acre shall be reviewed subject to the requirements of section 47-24.3 conditional use. Now, why this is important and why I don't necessarily have an issue with the applicant seeking a variance from this provision is that it kind of takes it's an interpretation position that city staff has taken with regards to the application of this particular code section. So the maximum density of the area would be 35, and anything above 35 would require a conditional use approval. The alternative process would have been an interpretation process, which in both cases wouldn't be favorable because it would put to the board the position of creating a precedence that would apply to all development permits in the area. Staff has taken a position that this language continues to hold the density, although we have stricken the maximum density, continues to hold the density in the area at 50 dwelling units per acre, but would subject those developments that are above 30 to a conditional use.
Right.
If we came before the board with a interpretation question, we would either be asking the board to take a position that developments above 50 were just approved administratively, which probably would make no sense, or the alternative position, which would jeopardize a project like this. So in this instance, we're comfortable in treating this as a variance of this singular provision of the code and not resulting in a spot zoning. I'll turn to one more provision. Council kind of alluded to it in speaking about the density of the area. And that would be page 10. We're looking at D1, and it says that density within the downtown regional activity center zoning districts is limited according to the number of units as provided in the City of Fort Lauderdale adopted comprehensive plan as amended from time to time and as per section 4728 flexibility rules and any other applicable provisions of the Unified Land Development Regulation. Density may be increased as provided in the city's comprehensive plan.
So rather, Mr. Spence, rather than a variance, why wouldn't we direct the applicant to seek either an unusual use or a flex allocation?
Because in the RAC, the flex units have been assigned into the general pool.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Ms. Calhoun, did you want to add anything to that explanation?
I think Mr. Spence did a fantastic job. I don't have anything else to add.
As always.
As always, happy to answer questions though.
Are there any other questions for the board or from the board?
Yeah, I have just one question, Hope.
Yes.
And really maybe it's more directed at you, Dwayne.
Sure.
We're talking about units, but this is actually categorized with some commercial. How does that factor in? It's got 1,300 square feet of commercial.
If I could,
Impact as well.
if I could speak to that, actually, that's a good point. So when this was originally went through, that's actually a great point. Thank you for asking that question. for pointing out that the project has commercial on the ground floor commercial on the ground floor and residential above. Thank you. And that is actually in keeping with what the code and the intent of this particular zoning district is seeking, or it speaks to. The intent of the RAC RPO specifically calls for this. So the good thing about this particular project is that although, again, the building envelope is the same, the number of units is different, it serves as a transition specifically in keeping with and in line with what's outlined in the code. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
Assistant City Attorney Dwayne Spence, there's one thing that the board might want to consider, given that the provision, and I know the applicant might not be happy with it, but given that the provision provides for conditional use for developments that are over 35, and that the density of this would exceed that if you felt that they've met their burden of proof, that you would make a condition of that approval that they go through a conditional use approval process.
And we're
There's something-
perfectly fine with you not adopting that suggestion. Please.
Got it. And honestly, Mr. Spence, I looked at it as an either or, as an alternative to a variance. They could go through a conditional use if there was not a variance granted and still get to the same place.
I think you would still need a variance in order to apply to provision in that way.
Okay. All right, good to know. Any more questions from the board?
I would just ask that, again, considering what my client has been through here, prior approval, COVID, and now this, they have lost a substantial amount of time in construction. And the property is sitting, as you can see now, not consistent, not attractive to what's going on around.
Thank you, Ms. Calhoun. You just reminded me of the one question that was on my list that I jotted down that I didn't have. When did your client acquire the property vis-a-vis the approval process?
When did he obtain approval? Is that your question, sir?
When did he acquire, or she acquire, the property vis-a-vis the approval process? In other words, did they acquire the property after the city approvals, or did they already own the property before the city approvals?
They obtained approvals after owning the property.
Okay. Okay. If there's no more questions from the board, I'll open it up for public comment. Yeah, Mr. Reynolds.
Yeah, what I'm concerned about the precedent. What keeps the neighbors that are on the south, I guess would be on the north side of the street, making the same argument? Look what's on the south of 9th. I want to have that too. How does that not become a wildfire where everybody down the street wants to do the same thing, increase their density?
Well,
and then
the neighbors on the north have the increased density. It's
okay, well then
the
people on this side, the south side.
Right. Yeah. No, I hear you.
The problem is the street is the dividing line. So if we grant this to you for this property, what keeps all the other people saying, hey, they got it, what about us? And then it moves to the next street and it moves to the next street. Where's the protection from that occurring, which would defeat the whole purpose of the zoning?
Or the original dividing line in the zoning, the step down between that and what is really single family behind it.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, any more questions from the board?
So just, again, there are transition zones that are designed in those codes. And I find that this is looking as if it's part of that transition, but I can't answer that question. Bert, maybe you can.
And I see Ms. Crawford has her hand up. Mr. Ford, do you want to answer Ms. Ellis's question?
It appears Anthony Fajardo is headed this way.
Director Anthony Fajardo is heading towards the podium.
Good evening. Anthony Fajardo, Director of Sustainable Development. So Ms. Ellis, you're absolutely correct. The master plan requires us to look at the overall mass and scale of these buildings. And there are transition zones designed to really come out from the edges and go up to the center. So if you picture the downtown core would be your tallest no limit buildings. And then as you move out to the edges, it drops down. In this location, we looked at all that. Ms. Calhoun is absolutely correct. The building form is fine. The building form meets all the requirements. We also, I'm sorry?
For the step down, all the requirements for that transitional step down.
Exactly, for the building form of the building. We're really here just about the density. So you could effectively, if this was denied tonight, the applicant has the ability to reduce the number of units down to what the cap is listed in the notation that was mentioned earlier, and the building form doesn't have to change. So I think, does that answer your?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Ms. Crawford? Thanks, Anthony.
Yes, sir.
You've got your hand up. I said you've got your hand up.
And I don't have anything.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak on this item?
Yes, we have Pat on the line for the Zoom meeting for this item.
Okay. And do we want to turn his or her mic on?
Can you hear me?
No.
No, it's on.
We can hear you here.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. We have Pat on our Zoom call, Pat Frawley.
Got it. And is Pat connect? There's Pat. Great.
Unmute.
Pat,
Patrick
you
Frawley.
take your name and address for the record.
Patrick Frawley, 216 Southeast 10th Street, just south of 9th. Here to object to the variance request. As there are deep concerns for traffic, parking, safety, and also as an owner of a home on the north side of Southeast 10th Street for the foundation of the single family homes that directly abut this project, to not issue a variance. We've got 5 children that I'm raising on this street. That cars are zipping up and down Southeast 10th Street all the time. And for those reasons, I strongly object. And as do, I would say, every single homeowner on Southeast 10th Street feels very strongly about this. And I know some of my neighbors are there in person. But I don't think the queue nor the what's the building directly across the street on 9th are good examples, as they are in the rack. And yes, they can have that density. But I think that's been brought up by a few folks in the meeting, that the demarcation line is Southeast 9th. And let's leave the dwelling to 50 per acre. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frawley. Is there
And
anybody else?
I also have the owner of 207 Southeast 9th with me.
210? Has he or she signed up to speak?
No, sir, I have not. My name is Michael Rush. We live
Hold
immediately
on before you
adjoining.
do. How much time does Mr. Frawley have left? Jamie? Or Mr. Moderator, how much time on the 5 minutes does Mr. Frawley have left?
Yeah, I was on time.
Okay, not a problem. Is there any objection at the board level to letting the neighbor who has not signed up to speak yet identify himself and speak?
As long as he's sworn.
Yep. So, sir, were you sworn in when Jamie swore in all the speakers?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you could state your name and address for the record.
My name is Michael Rush. My wife is Janice Rush. We own 207 Southeast 10th Street. Our property immediately abuts the property under consideration.
Right.
We've owned that property. We've owned that property for, I don't know, 8-10 years. We're a single family home there, small swimming pool in the back. We strongly object to this. I think the city needs to consider where they choose to draw the line. The city has drawn the line before. It keeps creeping south towards Broward General. Obviously, I'm one little person, but somebody has to decide where it makes sense to draw the line between a high-density structure and single-family homes. The discussion previously that this was consistent with the neighborhood is absolutely incorrect. The people north of us, north of 9th Street, do not abut single-family structures. The current plan would bring this place into a high-density program immediately adjacent to single-family homes. This is not what the city has planned to do. Is it a new change in the city's direction? We strongly oppose this. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else online? And then I promise the people in the audience will get to you in a second. Anybody else online signed up to speak on this?
No, sir.
No. Pat, can you mute yourself, please?
I will. Thank you, guys.
Why don't we go for is there anybody in the audience signed up to speak?
Chair, we have Victor, excuse me for the pronunciation. Thank you. He is here to speak.
Great. And if you could approach the podium and the microphone and identify yourself by name and address before you begin.
My name is Victor Rabalka. I live at 217 Southeast 10 Street. I've lived in that house for 50 years. I'm a retired Sergeant Major from Special Forces. I did 33 years, and I'm also a retiree from Miami Beach Police Department. When he talks about the speeds on the street, I brought my radar gun home, even though I don't have the authority to take and arrest someone on my property. They're cruising down 40, 50 miles an hour. I have a daughter that's 13 years old. She comes out in the street, she's dead meat. Next, that building is directly in my backyard. Here's my problem. On my east side, they just approved the building. They put the floor, the pavement, 4 feet above my property. When they build the house over there on the north side, they're going to do the same thing. So what's that do to me? It puts me into a tunnel, puts me into a canyon. I have no drainage. Now my house gets flooded. Well, everybody's responsible for their own water retention. That's what they say. My water retention used to go out through 9th, used to go over to 3rd and down to Andrews. Now my water retention, because what they basically did was built a concrete pool around my house. So I'm flooded. So after 50 years, I tell you what, the past year and a half, I slept better in Afghanistan than I did there. I got construction going on 2 o'clock in the morning to my east. It's disgusting. My baby can't go to school. She's up all night. This is what I'm talking about as far as your development for downtown may be good, but what it's doing is what happens to us homeowners? After 50 years, am I supposed to pack up and leave? I can't die there? Think about it. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Sergeant Major. Anybody else from the audience? Shaquila?
No, sir.
In that case, let me close the public hearing. Any comments, conversations, questions from the board?
Chair,
Wait.
we have someone here to speak.
In that case, let me reopen the public hearing.
Yeah, it's public.
And if you could please identify yourself by name and address.
Yes, my name is Martin Gonzalez. I live on 208 Southeast 10th Street. And the way I see the development, the only way of making double the density as a real estate broker is if the land doesn't permit.
Sir, have you been sworn in?
I'm sorry?
Were you sworn in at the beginning of the meeting?
I'm sorry. The way I see
No, sir, before you start, were you sworn in by a recording secretary at the beginning of the meeting? Jamie, why don't you swear him in?
I didn't know.
Yes.
Did you already do that?
Okay, he was not sworn.
Okay.
Jamie, why don't you swear him in?
Yes, please raise your right hand again. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give during this public hearing with truthful and accurate?
Yes, I swear.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I didn't know the protocol. This is my first meeting.
So, okay, don't worry about it. You're good.
So the way I see that you can double the density of a plan without being, I'm a real estate broker. Is instead of going flat, you need to go up, right? And the problem is with the single family homes that like Victor or the neighbors, is that the valuation of the property goes down. Because if you want to have the peaceful enjoyment of your backyard and your pool, then you have all these windows facing your face. And that devaluate the value of your house. It's way more difficult to sell a single family home behind a building than when you have another neighbor, another single family home. That affects the valuation of the property. And I don't think that this development is going to increase, but decrease the valuation of the property. The other issue is the removal of soil. If you're going to build double, you're going to have to remove double in order to make the foundation. That removal of the soil is going to affect the how do you say, the foundation of the single family homes. And I see this all the time, that they have cracks, the foundations on the single family, they have cracks after they build a 10 floor, development by the house. It affected. The other thing, we have now we have in Miami, the other case of the Champlain Tower that went down, right? Because they put this huge structure right behind the Champlain Tower. One of the reasons that is under investigation right now is because how this structure, that is the double, is super heavy, how affect the rest of the constructions around it. That is why I oppose. Why I oppose for the double density on the variation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public that wish to speak on this matter? In that case, let me close the public hearing. Ms. Calhoun, I didn't hear you specifically ask for rebuttal time, but I thought you wanted it anyway, so we'll give you some rebuttal time.
Thank you. I did not. I didn't realize that I would have others here in opposition. So I just want to remind the board of a few things, and we recognize the sensitivity of the neighbors, but a few things. This property, as we've said a few times, is located in the city's RAC. So the question is not about just the number of units, it's also about the types of uses permitted on the property. So if we don't build the residential number of units here that we're asking for, then we could always potentially switch to increasing the amount of commercial. Commercial, as we know, always has more traffic than residential. When this project was originally approved, it was evaluated for traffic impacts, for concurrency, for the impacts to the neighborhood. All of those things were evaluated previously and approved. So again, whether it's 41 units, 20 units, or 30 units, the envelope of the building does not change. So we recognize that the single family residents are concerned about what's going to be built there and how it would look. But whether or not the variance is granted, the envelope of, I keep saying this, the envelope, the exterior of the building, the setbacks, the height, everything else would remain the same. What changes is what's underneath the roof, under the roof. And if traffic is the concern, again, that has been evaluated by staff and no issues were found. Furthermore, as you can see, the projects that are across the street from us are more dense or similarly dense to what we are proposing. So again, in keeping with the pattern of development in the area, in keeping with the fact that this is a transitional zoning district, that is the RAC, RPO, we believe that our request is consistent with what's going on. We believe that we have satisfied the criteria, and we would ask that you would approve our request this evening.
Thank you. And with that, I will close the hearing and turn it over to the board for either comments, questions, or a motion.
Chair, I just have a question for staff.
Sure.
So I went online and I looked at the RPO, and it was very clear on the online, tool that we have, which is a great tool for, the city. I think it's fairly new because I had not seen that before. They used to have the old zoning map, but now there's a full tool that's provided online. It's pretty clear that it says 50 units per acre. And I kind of read, the language here on page 10, it says up to 50 units per acre, but I'm confused. Is there nowhere that it actually says 50 units per acre now in the code?
The provision that they're seeking the variance from is where you find the reference to 50 units per acre.
Right, but it says up to, but that's not exactly clear. So I mean, again, I just, for me and my purposes, I think probably the code should maybe be a little more clear, but it's, I guess from my understanding from the board, it is the intent of the city staff to keep it at 50 based on what they're saying. And, we're not a zoning board, so.
So do I hear a motion? Then let me start with, do I hear a motion in the affirmative? Mr. McGinley, Ms. Ellis, Mr. Maxey, Mr. Elfman,
Would you
Mr.
like,
Reynolds?
would you like me to make the motion in the affirmative regardless of the?
Yes.
Might as well, if you can make a motion in the affirmative, and we'll see if it passes.
Okay.
Remember, this is a variance, so it would need to pass 5-2.
I understand. I would like to make a motion to approve the variance as it has met, as it has met the requirements of the board.
It met the requirements for a variance under the city code.
Under the city code.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Show Ms. Ellis seconding. Any discussion before the vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Would like to go back to staff again, just for some clarity, because what we're talking about is a zoning issue, but a density issue. And I think, as Anthony explained, the project itself, the buildings meet the criteria. So whether we love it or hate it, the building meets the criteria. It's basically the number of units within the building.
Yeah, the massing of the building meets the criteria, but not the
Correct.
density.
Well, it's already been approved. It's the density inside, it's the number of units inside the building
Exactly.
that are in question. Is that
Right.
correct? And that's the variance we're being asked to address. Thank you.
All right, any more questions from the board? Otherwise, Jamie, I'll ask you to call the roll. And remember, there's a motion in the affirmative to grant the variance.
Correct. Mr. Maxey,
No.
Mr. McGinley,
No.
Mr. McTeague, Mr. Reynolds,
No.
Mr. Elfman,
No.
Ms. Ellis,
No.
Chair Nelson.
No. Motion
Unanimously
fails. Is there a motion? Is there another motion to grant a lesser variance? Hearing none, the application dies on the vine for lack of a motion to pass it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Calhoun. Why don't we move on to the next agenda item? Unless, do the members who were there in person, do you guys need a break?
Sure.
I think Crush, I'm sure he'll be quick,
Take a break.
or we can take.
I'm good with a break.
Oh, he wants
Go for a break? We've got 3 cases left. You tell me, we can take a break now. We can take a break after Mr. Crush. We could soldier right through.
We'll take a break now.
Why don't we take a break for 10 minutes?
Perfect.
And Mr. Moderator, will you please note the response time?
Okay.
Thank you.
That's in the wrong grant.
I heard you.
Howard back. Howard back.
I will be in a second.
More now.
Jason, did you bring samples?
No, I did not.
Hi.
I don't have any. I can't catch a break.
Everybody back?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Why don't we call the next case? Board of Adjustment case 2108004, Ronnie Piku, represented by Jason S. Crush from Crush Law, PA. We go down for the roll for disclosures, please.
Yes, Mr. Elton,
Spoke with counsel.
Ms. Ellis,
Site visit, spoke with counsel.
Mr. Maxey,
None.
Mr. McGinley,
Spoke with counsel.
Mr. McTeague,
Spoke with counsel.
Mr. Reynolds,
None.
Chair Nelson.
Spoke with counsel. All right. Mr. Crush, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason Crush with Crush Law. Our business address is 600 Southeast Second Court, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Here on behalf of the property owner, on behalf of the tenant, the potential tenant, applying for a special exception to section ordinance 5-26 for 429 Northwest First Avenue. It is located in the Flagler Village area. You can see on the map here, it is just north of 4th and just south of 5th in this area. There is currently a restaurant just to the north of it called Then and Now. That is actually the location that we fail our liquor distance measurement to because they do have a 4 COP quota license. My client has actually leased the property in the red circle, the property just to the north of it, and the property to the east that is now a retention pond, which will be converted to a parking lot for the restaurant as we go through the site plan approval process with the city. In the area, this is an area where we have the Fat Village Art Walk. We've got different event spaces. We've got Borrowed Time Tattoos, and we've got the Here and Now restaurant that does have a liquor license as well. The space is currently vacant, and as I said, we'll be processing a site plan application through the city's process for conversion of this once office-y type space into a bona fide restaurant licensed by the Division of Hotels and Restaurants at the state level and through business tax in the city of Fort Lauderdale. The concept at this point is a local farm to table type of entertainment venue restaurant, employing local fare, mostly as we're in South Florida, will be seafood based. We're still developing that concept, and it will obviously be shaped by customers' expectations as we move forward through the process. As you all know, we're required to be 300 feet distance from another establishment licensed to sell alcoholic beverages under section 5-26. We fall short of that. We're about 77 feet from the property that has the quota license to the north of us. The board, as you know, is authorized to grant special exceptions to liquor distance if it meets the criteria of not contrary to the public interest and not incompatible with adjoining properties in the area. We believe that we meet both of these criteria as Fat Village is a growing mixed use community. It is zoned RAC UV and RAC CC, which are mixed use zoning districts. And are not specific to one type of use. They garner to multiple uses: commercial, restaurant, bars, retail, residential, hotels. We have the True Hotel just to the south of us as well. With that, I can leave you with a picture of what we believe our food plates will look like. As I said, we're still in the concept phases because we have not gone through the site plan approval process because we can't move forward until we know that we can put a liquor license on the site. But I hope when it does open that you all come out and join us. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Mr. Crush, before you move forward, I want to note in your presentation, you said you were a distance of about 77 feet to the nearest establishment. The special exception requests a distance reduction down to 84. So I want to make sure you're not 7 feet short.
I misspoke. It's 84.
Okay.
I have another one that's
But
77.
otherwise, tonight's activities would do you no good.
I've got a 77 for next month. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Any questions from the board before we open it up for public comment? Food questions are not allowed. In that case, let me open it up. Is anyone signed up to speak on this?
No, sir.
In that case, let me close the public hearing and await either board discussion or a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the special exception for the required distance separation as it meets the requirements of the development code.
For the granting of a special exception. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And the second was from Mr. Elfman. Was that you?
Yes.
So I've got a motion and a second. Can we call the roll?
Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. McTeague,
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Elfman,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Maxey,
Yes.
Chair Nelson.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
That's unanimous.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And if we can move on to our next case, case number 5, which is Board of Adjustment case 2108-0006, Twin Angel Properties LLC, represented by Bradley Pistonik. Is Mr. Pistonik in the chambers?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Pistonik, were you sworn in at the beginning of the meeting?
Yes, I was.
I'm sorry, I'm noticing I've got the Bela Lugosi effect from the lighting in my room, so my apologies. If you could please state your name and address for the record, and then the floor is yours.
Yes, it's Brad Pistotnik, and the address is 500 Flamingo Drive, Fort Lauderdale.
Very good, sir. The floor is yours.
Yes, my wife and I bought the property. We have been coming back and forth down to Florida for quite some time now. We see a need for a generator in the property. We're having trouble finding a place for it because the side to the south has insufficient footage to put a generator in. The side to the back towards the canal has a swimming pool, so again, has no footage. The roof is flat, but we had an engineer look at it, and it's insufficient to hold the weight of the generator. So we were trying to get a variance to allow us to put in, take 7.68 feet of variance to have the generator on the northeast side of the property. The property going to the northeast has a huge hedge there. I don't believe it'll be visible to any neighbors, and we don't have a better place to put it. So we're asking for that variance. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. I assume you want to reserve time for rebuttal if there are any questions. And let me ask if there are any questions from the board. And I've got one, Mr. Pistonik.
Yes.
Is this a propane generator, a gas generator, or where will the tank be stored?
It's actually a gas generator that's been modified to use the gas from the house.
Okay, very good. So there's no extra tank for the generator.
Correct.
Okay. Any members of any other questions from the board?
Blaise McGinley, has any consideration been given to the noise? Because to me, that would be the biggest issue.
When the consideration, this particular area, if you go to the northeast, the neighbors are across the street. There's a significant hedge that's probably 8 to 10 feet high that I believe will block most of the noise.
I'm looking for an aerial.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, in disclosure, I did a site visit.
Oh, I'm sorry, we did not do disclosures. My apologies. Let's back up and do that. Jamie, can you run us through the roll?
Yes, Mr. Elfman.
I did a site visit.
All right. Ms. Ellis already stated. Mr. Maxey,
None.
Mr. McGinley,
None.
Mr. McTeague,
Site visit.
Mr. Reynolds,
None.
Chair Nelson.
No. Thank you for reminding me, Gina. So, Mr. Pistonik, I'm trying to figure out directionally, are we talking about putting the generator up closer to the solar bridge?
The area that was shown, I think, on the map that Mr. Musabe provided to the panel here has it at the back of the house, which would be to the pretty much the last area before you go around to the back side of the house. It would be closer to the bridge, but it's still at the edge of the house.
Got it. But basically, you've got a canal on one side, the Solar Plaza Drive bridge before you get to any neighbor's house. It's not touching your neighbor to the south.
Correct.
Got it.
It's also shielded with hedge.
Yeah. Okay, and there's no one.
Mr. Chair,
No one-
is the hedge sufficiently tall enough to cover the entirety?
Yes, it is. I haven't measured it, but I believe it's about 9 to 10 feet tall.
But you look like a very honest man. If you could just give me your commitment that the hedges will be cut so that it does shield it, that would be.
It will
good
shield
enough.
it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, no members of the public, so let me close the public hearing aspect, and I'd love to entertain a motion.
Keep going.
Mr. Chair, I will
Yes.
make a motion for case PLN BOA 210800006 to for a variance because it meets the requirements set by the city
For the issuance of a variance.
for the requirements of the variance.
Great. I've got a motion.
I'll second it. Howard Elfman.
I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion before a vote?
No.
In that case, Jamie, will you call the roll?
Mr. McTeague,
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Elfman,
Yes.
Zealous,
Yes.
Mr. Maxey,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
Chair Nelson.
Yes,
And that was Mr. Maxey made that motion?
that was,
Okay, thank you.
which I believe is Mr. Maxey's first motion in history. Very good, Mr.
That's
Maxey.
why I felt like I needed to step up to the plate.
You know, you're gonna get no, don't do that from anybody else on the board. Very good. Why don't we move to our last case? And unfortunately, my screen holding the agenda is blank. So give me a second.
Thank you.
And our last case of the evening, Board of Adjustment Case 21090001, Florida Places for Rent LLC. Agent is Hope Calhoun from Dunay, Mescal and Backman. Is Ms. Calhoun still in the chambers?
Yes.
And Ms. Calhoun, as you move towards the dais, Jamie, if you can go through the roll and we'll do disclosure.
Disclosures. Mr. Elfman,
Due disclosure, site visit, spoke to council, and also spoke to council for the neighbor.
Ms. Ellis,
Site visit.
Mr. Maxey,
None.
Mr. McGinley,
I take that back. I apologize. I spoke with counsel.
sorry, Mr. McGinley, did I call? Mr. McTeague,
Spoke with counsel.
Mr. Reynolds,
None.
and Chair Nelson.
Spoke with counsel and counsel for the neighbors. All right, Ms. Calhoun, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hope Calhoun on behalf of the applicant. And yes, I am still here. Thank you for having me. So yes, I'm here on behalf of the applicant. My business address is 14 Southeast 4th Street, Boca Raton, Florida. This is a variance application for the property located at 2309 Barcelona Drive. So the parcel outlined in red is the parcel that we're speaking of, and we're seeking a variance, a wall variance in essence. I believe that you were provided with a letter of support from this property owner. If you don't have it, I can provide you with a hard copy. And that letter came from, from this property owner right here, just so you're aware as we move forward. Do you have that? Yes. Okay. So, and the variance that we are seeking on is directly adjacent to him. It's on the north and the east facade. So this is the neighbor that provided the letter of support. Excuse me. I should also point out that tonight, along with me, is the property owner and our project architect. So as stated previously, this is a variance request to increase the maximum wall height from 6 feet to 9 feet for a total variance of 3 feet 2 inches. I believe that the board has seen these variances before. This is not a variance of our own doing. Similar to other cases like this that you have heard, when my client went, submitted their building plans to the city, they were advised, and I have the note from the building department, which states that they had to build in accordance with what the proposed flood elevation was going to be or is going to be. And so that it raised the elevation of their property. As a result, the height of their wall also was raised. It just, since the ground is higher, the wall is higher. So that's how that happened. The variance criteria, again, we meet the variance criteria. This is definitely not a self-imposed hardship. And this is the literal application will deprive us of our substantial property rights. Again, I have provided responses to all of this in my written correspondence. I'm happy to go through each and every one of them again, but you have them.
So Ms. Calhoun, I'm going to ask both you and staff, I think, the same question. There is currently pending before the City Commission a modification of the fence height ordinance to deal with issues related to raised elevations for flood elevation. Is this application consistent with that ordinance? And you know what, actually, let me ask staff that question. So Bert or Mohammed, if indeed the ordinance was in place, would this application be consistent with that ordinance?
Yes. If the applicant, yes, they don't need an variance if the
if indeed, right, if indeed passes. Right. So this is really assuming that ordinance change goes through. This is really a timing issue more than anything else.
That is accurate, yes.
That's correct.
That's my only question.
And that's due back for a second reading on the 21st. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I just want to say, if I can, thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. I was going to get that, but thank you for asking. Thank you for stating that. So if our application goes forward tonight, we would ask that you would approve the application. But just to be clear about what was just said, assuming the ordinance passes on second reading next week, we would not need this variance. If we were coming next month, we wouldn't be here tonight because the ordinance.
Right. All this does is get you out of a several-week delay in your permitting. Got it.
That's correct. And we've been delayed quite a bit so far. So thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
So,
Hearing none. Ms. Calhoun, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, that's an 8-day delay. Not several weeks.
You're right, an 8-day delay. Thank you for the math.
Happy to help.
Ms. Calhoun, I take it you want to reserve time for rebuttal?
Thank you, I do, yes.
Okay, so let me open this up for public comment. I do know we've got several people signed up. Do we want to start with online people first? My apologies to the people in the chambers.
Yes. Are you starting with us?
I think I'm going to start with whoever's online.
Chair,
So Shaquila, who do we have first?
William Rue.
Mr. Rue, is Mr. Rue's microphone turned on?
It is, and I've not been sworn in.
If Jamie, could you please swear Mr. Rue in?
Yes.
Swear
Mr. Rue, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give during this public hearing will be truthful and accurate?
I do.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Rue, to make you do this, but can you turn your camera on and let us redo the oath?
Let me see how I can do that, actually. I've been trying to see how to manage it, and I'm pretty good at Zoom. Ah,
He's got his emoji hand.
now I go.
Oh, have we lost him?
Says recording in progress.
We're not seeing your picture. I'm going to assume that your hand was up and we're fine. There we go. If you could raise
I
your
can't
right
see
hand,
you.
we'll redo the
Okay.
swearing.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give during this public hearing will be truthful and accurate?
I do.
Thank you.
And Mr. Rue, if you can state your name and address for the record.
Yes, it's William Rue. Address is 301 Northeast 23rd Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
And directionally, where are you in relationship to this property?
We are 2 houses to the west.
Got
Actually, 1 house to the west.
Okay.
So the reason I was surprised to see this variance, but I do have a question. So I'd start with the question. Am I to believe that the wall heights are now approved to go to 9 feet 8 inches because it's forecasted that the water height in a hurricane could get that high?
No, sir.
Okay, so why is it going to 9.8?
The flood criteria and therefore the minimum floor elevation is changing. And as those measures change, they don't necessarily change at the street level, which is where we measure fences from, but they change at the finished floor. We would end up having a bunch of houses built where the fence or wall that gave them visual shelter would only be at the house height 2 or 3 feet high. So it allows a higher wall to accommodate the higher finished floor elevation required by the changes in the FEMA flood criteria.
Got it. Thank you. Then in that case, I no longer oppose because we're in a new home 2 doors down and the same thing has happened for us. So I now understand. Thank you so much.
Very good. Is that the end of your testimony or question?
That is.
Very good. Shaquila, do we have anybody else online?
We have Orlando Sharp that signed up to speak. Well, I don't see him as an attendee though.
Mr. Moderator, do you see him anywhere out in the ether?
No, sir, he's not present.
Okay, in that case, why don't we go to any people who want to speak who are in the chambers, and we'll go back and make one last check before we close the public hearing.
Okay, we have George Brewer in person.
Mr. Brewer, have you been, if you can approach the dais?
He's actually on our team. He's our product architect, so he'll speak to rebuttal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got
So
it.
next we have Michael Marshall.
Mr. Marshall? Is Mr. Marshall in the audience?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Okay, and I can't see if you're at the dais or not. Have you been sworn in?
No, I need to be sworn in.
Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give during this public hearing will be truthful and accurate?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Marshall, for the record, your name and address before you begin your testimony.
Certainly, yeah. My name is Michael Marshall. I'm with the Gunster Law Firm, address 450 East Las Olas Boulevard, Suite 1400.
And are you here representing a client tonight?
I am, Mr. Chair. I'm here on behalf of the property owner at 307 Northeast 23rd Terrace, which is a property that's located to the immediate north of the property that is the subject of the application.
Got it.
Good evening. It's good to see you all. So I think this really boils down to, I can try to go through all the variance criteria. I think it really ultimately boils down to just the question of whether or not this is in fact the minimum variance necessary to make reasonable use of the property. I do find I work in jurisdictions representing property owners and developers, and oftentimes I find local governments that will push people to do things that may not be exactly what's required by code. And so I can understand how the city would say, well, we know there may be amendments to the flood maps that would increase the base flood elevation. I mean, the current elevation is 5 feet. for the current applicable flood map, which means that you need a foot of freeboard above the flood elevation with your finished floor, which is 6 feet. In this case, the applicant has finished floor elevation of 8 feet because of what may be a new base flood elevation in the future. It's not currently in effect, but that base flood would be 7 feet. With that said as well, the code requires that the finished floor be elevated a foot above the base flood elevation. It doesn't require the entire property to be. In fact, the section of the code that first establishes the 1 foot freeboard requirement is followed by a provision that which states that, that as far as the limitation on use of fill to support bridges and buildings and structures, the use of fill to elevate buildings and structures is not permitted, with the exception of interior area of slab to stem wall construction. So in other words, under the structure itself, you can place fill, compact the fill, build the structure to raise the finished floor elevation, but it's not the entire property. In fact, it goes on to say that minor grading and placement of fill shall be permitted for landscaping and drainage purposes under and around buildings. But that is hard to say that lifting an entire site 4 feet is a minor placement of fill. And so to the extent the applicant agreed to do with what staff may have suggested or recommended, that I submit to you that they agreed to do that on their own free will. It's like offering a voluntary condition. The applicant could have easily just pointed to the code and insisted on what the code required, but they chose otherwise, which, like I said, in many ways can be understandable, but then to turn around and say that that's not self-imposed is somewhat dubious at best. But again, even if we were to say, okay, that was not self-imposed, accept that, to go to 10 feet is, I mean, they could ask for a variance. There are yards all around the city that have fences that are 4 feet 4 inches. To say that anything less than 5 feet 8 inches is a hardship is really difficult to understand. We would be saying that properties all over town are suffering hardships because of code requirements that allow only 4 foot 4 inch front yard fences, for example, if there's no transparency. And my neighbor across the street has a 2 foot fence, then above that has 2 more feet of an iron stake fence that's completely transparent. They seem to have no problem with their children not stumbling over that fence. They don't complain of privacy. I do believe that the petitioner wants to have 5 feet 8 inches, but wants and desires of subjective wants and desires of individuals are not variance criteria. It's whether or not he suffers a hardship and cannot make any other reasonable use of his land for a fence that's less than 5 feet 8 inches above grade on his side, which means on my client's side, it's 10 feet, which is higher than his roof line. It's less than 10 feet away. So effectively that side of his house is, as someone mentioned earlier on their house, is relegated to basement space. So they're looking out of their kitchen and living room window into a 10-foot wall. So again, we believe if anything, the petitioner is not asking the minimum variance necessary. I'm not here to design and tell them what variance they should be seeking, but I'm submit to you that what they are seeking is not the minimum variance necessary. I'm not sure, exactly the language of the pending code ordinance. I've seen it. I believe it does require some transparency on fences above certain heights. I don't believe it would allow you to go completely to 6 feet, especially if it's 10 feet on the other side with a concrete block wall. So in this case, the applicant could propose other building materials other than a concrete block wall if he's worried about security and safety, that provides transparency, that allows for light, that doesn't have the negative externalities that it's exerting on my neighbor, on my client's property. So, again, we understand the circumstance. We understand that cities can push people, and especially in flood zones, to protect their homes, to lift their finished floor elevations. We just believe that what's happened here is excessive. And again, variances aren't allowed for people to do excessive things. You're supposed to just request the minimum variance necessary. And so for that reason, we're here tonight to express our opinions and hope that you take them under consideration.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the board?
Do you know what the NAVD for that property is?
For the property that's seeking the variance, or for my
Yes.
client's property? The current is probably around 5 feet.
Is it 5 feet?
Just give us a minute. We are looking up.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you.
And just while you're looking that up, can we go back to the aerial slide, not the proposed site plan, but the aerial slide that shows the relationship of the two affected neighbors?
This
There
is
we go.
Hope Calhoun on behalf of the applicant. This is Mr. Sharp's residence. He provided the letter of support, and I believe
Right.
this is Mr. Marshall's client. I also just want to point out with regard to, I would like to point out that with regard to stating that we are requesting what we want as opposed to what is required, I have in my hand, and I will provide a copy to each board member if you'd like, the comment that we received from the planning department. And specifically the language provides, please be advised that this property's flood risk has increased from AE5 to AE7 and must be regulated by a higher risk. And then the next relevant sentence reads, the minimum required elevation for this structure is 8 feet NAVD. So again, it wasn't our
It's
request.
8
or
feet NAVD.
For ours, yes.
But that's why I was asking them what the NAVD is.
Right.
Bert Forward, the city of Fort Lauderdale zoning department, checking the existing adopted FEMA maps. The current floodplain is an AE5, which BFE +1 for finished floor would be 6.
Yeah.
Do you want to know what the preliminary maps show?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Bert.
Let me look up the preliminary maps real quick.
If I may quickly while he's doing that.
That's NAVD 88, is it not?
So the preliminary maps, which are going to be the proposed maps that should be adopted within a year or so, predicted to be an AE7.
Correct. And if I may just clarify, it may be adopted within a year. It's not the current effective firm. Florida law is pretty clear that when you submit an application, it's the law that's in effect at the time of the application that applies. And secondly, more importantly, even with.
Sir, before you move on, are you saying that the city's incorrect in requiring that for these floor plans?
I'm not suggesting that the city's incorrect in recommending it.
It doesn't look like a recommendation. It looks like a requirement.
Well, I think that if I understand council correctly, reading the correspondence from staff, they directed them to elevate the building.
Right.
The finished floor elevation for the building, not the grade for the entire parcel.
Got it. And if you look through the new ordinance to see how this is measured, because it's measured off of the finished floor elevation. So that you actually have coverage from the building, not necessarily the edge of the property.
Right. The ordinance hasn't been adopted yet, correct. But I'm not sure, I don't have the text of it, what it has as far as transparency requirements at certain levels of elevation. And
Would you care to cite us through those? Because I don't find any applicable ones.
I don't have this, perhaps staff has it. I didn't know we were applying ordinances hadn't been adopted, and my apologies.
Transparency requirement. I don't think there is, unless there is a waterway, the last 10 feet.
Dwayne Spence, Assistant City Attorney. There were two ordinances that were moving in tandem to the City Commission. The ordinance that had the transparency requirements died on first reading. So the only ordinance that's under review by the Commission on the October 21st would be the redefining of grade, which would impact this site.
Okay, Gina, are you still waiting for an answer from staff?
Okay, Gina, I understand. I can see your face. It's
Yes.
Currently, there is no transparency requirements for this specific, unless there is a waterway in the back where the last 10 feet has to be 30 inches. If it's solid fence, it can be 30 inches. If it's 6'6" high, it has to be 75% transparency, you know, like a clear.
But this lot does not have a waterway. That's
So,
accurate.
So, I mean, I think that the same thing is carried over. The change which you're trying to get, which you guys have asked us to, is just for the height of the fence where it is measured. And if the ordinance passes with the city commission reading, it would be as per the FEMA requirements.
So if I may, as I understand this, what we're talking about is a piece of dirt that's been raised 4 feet. There is no structure on that dirt as we speak. And yet we're talking to a fence that's not yet built and how we measure to get that fence. Correct? Now, in the past, what we've heard was an existing dwelling that was adding a fence and where we measured the grade from.
Let's put it this way. If the ordinance passes, the fill or no fill, it could be at the, let's say whatever the FEMA plus 6'6" would be the height.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to, I do think that.
That's what we have changed. You guys have asked us to change because originally it was from the base of the retaining wall. The height would be lowest adjacent side, which side it could be the lowest point. We would go and measure 6'6" from there. And technically the height on the other side would be 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet as you know, walls were formed. That's why they were coming here in front of you. And that's why you have asked us to look at it, and City Commission has asked us to change to measure the height of the retaining wall from FEMA, measure the height of the fence from FEMA grade.
Right.
So this is consistent with the ordinance that this board asked to be moved forward to the City Commission.
Can you
correct?
Say
Mr.
again,
Chair.
Howard.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, this is Chad. I just wanted to ask maybe the applicant if they would consider tabling this for the commission to make a ruling and therefore not be subject to a vote on this board and determine if they are included in this this new ordinance that's going to be passed, and they won't need a vote from us, and there's no possibility for failing if they don't get the right vote.
And I just want to clarify, what we're talking about is the new measurement is from what I presume to be what the finished floor elevation would be required per the FEMA maps. And so there's nothing, what we have here is someone is.
I'm trying to get to the applicant. I understand you have legal, but I'm asking the applicant a question.
Fair enough.
Good evening. I'm George Brewer. I'm the project architect. I was sworn in. My address is 85 Southeast 4th Avenue. There's been some misinformation given, partly by the attorney who was complaining for the neighbor. There is a structure on the site. There is a retaining wall built on the site. They're about ready to lay block and put the walls up. The retaining wall part of the property has been constructed, and it at the moment is 5 feet plus high. And the reason for that is quite simple, is that the road is at 2 foot NAVD. And we've been asked, we didn't want to, but during the time that we went in for permit, we were told that we had to comply with the preliminary NAVD from FEMA. Now, a lot of the homes in that neighborhood are older homes in the 70s, 60s, whatnot. And the typical way of building a home back then was 18 inches above crown of road. However, FEMA has played a role in, and this is a state requirement. This is not just a city requirement. So during the time of our permit application, we had to raise the house to 8 feet NAVD. That is 6 feet above the road. So that You are correct. That's an excessive amount of dirt. However, what you are incorrect about is not the whole site. It is only the backyard where the pool is. I think we're entitled to the same luxuries that everybody else on the street has, is to have a pool. If we're building a new home, everybody wants a pool. Everybody in this neighborhood has a swimming pool. So it's only the pool deck that is actually being retained. So you don't have to. Otherwise, if we had a flight of steps coming out of the back of the house, we would have no pool at all. Right now, the pool is only 6 feet wide. So we're asking for the bare bones minimum. Once we bring the site up to a certain level, which it is today, if you drive by there, it's already at that level. We are required by code to have a 4-foot pool barrier fence above that. So right now you got 2 feet, we're coming up 6 feet, and you got 4 foot. It's like 10 feet. It's excessive, but it's not self-imposed. If we had our way, we would not be building a house 8 feet above at an ABD. This was completely forced upon us.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your explanation. I think everybody on the board has a good understanding of this. We've been dealing with this and wrestling this for a couple of years now. We know what's exactly in the ordinance because we helped, push this through. The question that I have for the council is whether or not you want us to vote on this when there's an ordinance pending that from staff, from their mouths, says you will not have to, versus, you've already seen there's a decision here tonight. So that's the question, is if you want us to continue to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we like to go forward regardless.
Understood. Thank you.
So in that case, Hope, I have another question. So we're talking about basically 10 feet.
Yes.
And you have abutting property owners that are complaining.
One property owner.
Well, there's only 2 abutting property owners.
Yeah,
So-
the second one came to terms. So, I mean, I wouldn't call it a rousing support.
Understood.
They're taking a consideration for it. So
Understood.
what I'm getting at is, and looking at the property owner that's willing to work with you, he's shielded. The property behind you is not. Is there an opportunity to have further discussion with them to maybe find something that mitigates the impact to that property owner?
The only thing they've asked for is for us to have a fence that's lower. And again, like per code, we have to have a 4-foot fence. So.
Well, but you're asking for more than 4 feet. So that's why I'm asking you.
You're asking for a 6'6".
Sorry, Howard?
You're asking for a 6'6", basically.
No,
Right, no.
no, we're not.
No?
We're actually, the way the plans are, I realize there's a sketch here for 5'8", but we're actually asking for 5 feet. So
So your fence is going to be 5 feet.
yeah, 5 feet and
from your dirt, right?
From our dirt, yeah.
Which is already higher than the abutting property owner.
Oh yeah,
So that's 9 feet.
exactly.
So I wanted to be sure that we're all understanding.
Yeah.
I understand that you're looking for 5, but you've already been required to have 4 additional, and you have an impact behind you. And is there any way to mitigate that? Maybe your fence isn't solid concrete. Maybe it's something
Well,
else.
okay, so we want to landscape it rather heavily.
That's on your side.
On our side.
That does not help the abutting property owner.
The abutting property to the north, it's the side of their property. It's a rental property. There's almost no windows on that side. It does not affect any negativity to their backyard. They have a backyard that faces to the west. That's where their pool is located. You can see it on the site map. So there's no negative effect. In fact, if you wanted to spin it, it could be a
I think
positive.
we're talking about different property.
No, we're not.
Property to the north is the sidewall going off their garage. But speaking of which, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. I want to go back to a statement made by counsel for that neighbor who said their kitchen window looked out at that wall and it was basically a tunnel. So if counsel for the neighbor can get back up and clarify, because that looks like a sidewall coming off of, if not the garage, the front family room. Are there windows facing this
Yes.
directive?
Mr. Chair. Actually, the property owner is here tonight as well. He is, it's not a rental. He owns the property. He's renovating the property to move here with his family. He has 3 children. They all attend or have attended Virginia Schumann Young Elementary School. He owns a business in Fort Lauderdale. So it is most certainly not a rental property, but he does intend and has intended to redevelop it or to renovate it so they can make it their home. The wall that faces the neighbor that will be facing this 10-foot wall is where his kitchen is located. It's also where his dining room is located. There are windows for both of those rooms and a bedroom. And so there's a bedroom window as well that is on that building facade. So
And he's roughly 5 feet off of that side yard, I take it?
yeah,
Isn't that correct? Isn't that a 5-foot setback?
Yeah, I would imagine so.
it's probably not like on the number 5. I think that would be the minimum, but actually talking about the minimum bulk regulations, the discussion, I understand what everyone is saying with this, with the pending ordinance and how grade would be measured differently, where you would look at the finished floor elevation. But I still submit to you that it creates a problem. I mean, there's nothing that would have prevented this property owner from putting his finished floor elevation at 9 feet. Why not? Why not go to 9 feet? Does that mean he then gets to go 11 feet high? I believe the way the ordinance should be read is that whatever the minimum required finished floor elevation is, based on the firm map, you measure from there for your fence height. And in this case, the current map is 5 feet. His minimum finished floor elevation is 6 feet. That's where you would then measure the 6 feet from. It's from 6 feet. They're measuring it from 8 feet because they decided, pursuant to staff's suggestion, not because it's required by code, to go to 8 feet. I do not believe they should be able to avail themselves of that. That is a, it's a, I don't know how to describe that. It is an unfortunate opportunity for him, unfortunate for the neighbor. Because again, what if the maximum building height, well, if it's 50 feet and he decides to make his finished floor elevation at 14 feet. So now we can have a wall that's 20 feet high on the property line, 6 feet from a neighbor.
Just, I will leave this comment on the record, and I keep harping on it because we keep hearing that we're doing what we want. I wasn't involved with the planning process. Our architect and the client were, but they discussed it with staff, is my understanding, and they, again, this is tall, so they would not do something like this of their own volition. So for that statement to be made continuously is just not accurate. So I'm going to distribute, I have copies, but I'll give you this one because I highlighted it. And it clearly states, and this is from staff, and staff can speak for themselves, that the minimum elevation for this structure is 8 feet and AVD. So it is not our choice. It was a requirement.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, Hope, I don't
Yes,
think,
ma'am.
I don't believe that we are contesting what you're
Thank
saying.
you.
Actually, what I'm asking is, could you find a way to mitigate the impact that you're making on the surrounding property?
And I did.
And I understand one guy seems to be willing to take an advantage from it, but you have another one that's not. And while we have worked very hard to get this ordinance through, I will tell you that, because we faced this over and over and over again. It was not done to the detriment of other people.
Fair
No,
enough.
that's my point.
And I think what you heard, Mr. Marshall, or maybe his client said, whoever, that they're planning to redevelop or renovate or whatever it is.
Better hope they don't go higher than you.
And they have that right? They have that opportunity. Right. But there will be, I'm pretty sure, because on the other side of his property, there's substantial landscaping. So I'm pretty confident that landscaping will be installed against here once they redevelop their property on their side.
Let me talk to that for a second, and not to even get into the realm of suggesting an accommodation to you. But if it is your client's intent to heavily landscape on your side of the wall, which does nothing for your neighbor, they still look at a wall, not landscaping, that quite possibly something that was a bit more porous or open for the top several feet, so that what they saw was landscaping and not a concrete wall. Might not be a bad accommodation, still gets you the height you want and gives them something different from a concrete wall. Yes, sir.
If I can answer that, we did talk about doing that. And what happens is the vegetation will find its way through a porous fence. And then there's the argument, who's going to maintain it? Who's going to hedge it? All that kind of thing. So that was discussed and with staff and whatnot. So, but we decided that the best way for maintenance was to stick with the block wall, take it up to, you know, the height that would give us meet the code and also give us the privacy that we're looking for. If the neighbor in fact is going to be renovating the property to the north, and if he exceeds the 50% mark, then he will be required to bring his property up to the new FEMA elevation as well. So then therefore that fence will be already mitigated by his own.
But that's not prudent.
Yeah, that's not
No, I
even
know.
that issue here.
I know,
But
I know,
I'm going to
but-
subject to you, this is what you offered to someone else. Perhaps you should have at least made that same offer.
The offer was to.
Did he
What-
not?
No, they said they chose not to.
No, it wasn't that we chose, well, I'm not aware that we chose
Well,
not.
I'm just repeating what he just said. He's discussed it with others and they did not make that offer.
To landscape the north property.
Anything. Is what I ask you. What you're doing with this property is you can select the paint. You'll restore any damage to the landscape lighting, irrigation, and pool deck on his property. That's
That's a reasonable offer.
Okay. If that is your reasonable offer, I think we are probably done. We've heard testimony and rebuttal. And I don't believe there are any more members of the public, are there?
Hold on.
Yes.
Hold on.
I'm the owner, so I would like to explain what I have offered.
Absolutely, sir.
I haven't been sworn in.
Jamie?
Yes, sir. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give during this public hearing will be truthful and accurate?
I do.
Thank you.
And sir, if you could state your name and address for the record.
Milik Novovich, 2309 Northeast 37 Drive, Fort Lauderdale. And just to give a little bigger speech about how we got to this point, I met the neighbor, the gentleman sits over there. And when we do a fence on our site, we are and did offer and will do stockwood on both sides. We did that to Mr. Orlando Sharp on the east side. And of course, we're not going to finish a wall on my side without stockwood. I even promised to pull out lights for him, so he has lights on that side. But he needs to install his own fence at some point next to my fence. Because with code today, it's not enough that I have a fence and he doesn't have a fence. So next to my wall, he needs to install his own fence afterwards. He doesn't have a fence today. He needs to have a barrier of at least 4 feet from his side too. So I can stockwood Mr. Sharp. I offered him to paint it. Of course, if my workers goes in there and they break the landscaping or light, of course, that's normal common sense, being a gentleman and fixing whatever you break when you go into somebody's property. So I'm not here in any way to punish a neighbor. And even before this variance, I offered him to pull lights, so he has lights on the other side. And of course, we're going to stock a wall. You don't leave a block wall for anybody. So when my architect says we haven't offered anything, he doesn't know that part, but the gentleman is there. I'm sure he's going to confirm it. So you don't leave a wall without stocking on both sides, and you paint it in the same color as his house, as long as he gives you a color code. So that's the normal part. In this case here, if you look at his north side, he does have landscaping that is 30, I would say 40 feet high already right now. I would say 40 feet high, the landscaping is on the north side if you look at the area photo. So I don't have a problem going from 5'8" down to 5 feet, but I also need to have privacy when I walk or my wife walks in a bikini so the neighbors can't look in. That's only fair. So we are gonna landscape on our side to get as much greenery as possible on the top, but I do need to have a privacy wall or a fence. That's just how it is. So whatever I have to do to stock coat, to paint, to put lights, He even gave us access to build the he has been a gentleman through the whole process. And until yesterday, I didn't know we had a problem, and he has the right to complain. Nothing's going to change between us. I'm still going to do what I have to do. I even told him that, but what else can I do?
Understood.
I mean,
Yeah, we're just trying to get to the bottom of it.
yeah, and the
because-
bottom is I want to do what I can do, which means give him a beautiful retaining wall on the other side that other people will pay a fortune for. But don't forget, he needs to install his own fence on the other side.
We're very aware of fencing.
And
trust me, we are.
Yes, and a lot of people, they decide to just use one fence and thinks that's a barrier. It's not. So he needs to do the same on his side. And again, if it's not a problem on the north side where we have a barrier of, I would say 40 feet, then why is a feet a problem on the other side? And when we did design the house, we actually, out of a courtesy, because the lots are so small, decided to do a one-story house and not a two-story house. So a two-story house that would be 30 feet tall, and now we're fighting about 1 feet. You know, if I go back, then I'll pull up.
I believe it's the setbacks, because it is, they are small lots and they are very close.
Yes.
And many of these houses have been here a very long time.
And that's where we have the problem today. Half of them are flooded.
Yep.
But it is the retaining wall. We need to keep our own water. The next thing he was talking about, I explained to him with the drainage. If you look at it, the way the architect did the house, we're controlling our own water. We have, I think, 18 drains on the roof, goes into a French drain. You know, we are keeping our water on our own property. It's not going to flood him in any way. So we're just ahead of time. And with the old homes, it's hard to satisfy everybody. So thank you.
All right, Ms. Calhoun, any other rebuttal?
Thank you. Again, we ask that you just approve our application tonight.
Okay, let's close the public hearing. I don't believe there were any other speakers signed up, correct?
Correct.
And I will move it towards board discussion and or a motion. And not hearing any board discussion. Are there any motions?
Well, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make just a comment. You know, we've all been working on this, and ultimately, you know, we know where the water table is going. We know where the FEMA maps are going, and so this is a hard decision to come by. But I feel that I have to stick with what we developed was the best way forward, and I know it is impactful to the neighbors, but as he mentioned himself, you're facing flooding issues. This is why, as the city redevelops, that it's got to get higher, and that's just the reality. And so this is what the ordinance was, or the proposed ordinance was hopefully going to address, was to address the privacy issues as we go to redevelop the city. That is undoubtedly going to have to happen over the years.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I would like to make a motion to approve case number 6 PLN BOA 2109001 as it meets the requirements for a variance under the current Fort Lauderdale Development Code.
Very good. I've got a motion. Is there a second?
Second. Well, board, excuse me.
Nope, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure who's speaking.
This is Mohammed Malik.
Mohammed, what's up?
I just want to put it on the record. There is a Scribner's error in the on the case that I just want to point it out just to make sure that if you read it, a total deviation in height of 1 foot 6 inches. Actually, it's in brackets, it says 3'2". The 3 foot, it should have been 3 foot 2 inches. So I just want to make sure it's 3 foot 2 inches. That's it.
So let's stop for 1 second. Mr. Spence.
Yes, sir.
Does this affect the correct advertising of this item, and can we hear this item with that Scribner's error in place? Or does it need to be re-advertised?
No, it does not affect notice. If you take note of how the Scribner error is listed in the on the agenda, the correction clarifies, and it does provide notice to the public of either or distance for the deviation.
Great, thank you very much. So I've got a motion and I think I had a second. Did we have a second?
Yes, second.
Was that Mr. McTeague?
Yep.
Okay. Jamie, can you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Reynolds,
No.
Mr. Elfman,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
No.
Mr. Maxey,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. McTeague,
Yes.
Chair Elfman, I'm sorry, Chair Nelson.
Yes, I believe the motion passes 5-2.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Let me move to the next item. Is there any communication to the city commission? Not hearing any. Any comments or notes for the good of the city? Not hearing any.
None.
Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
And we are adjourned. Thank you very much.